All right. I think we are live. I'm going to ask if you are watching this right now, can you make a comment in the YouTube section, in the YouTube comments, and just let me know if you could hear me okay? Because we are having some issues with that, and I want to make sure everything is working before we get started. As always, Den is here. He's moderating things. You will see him in the comments, and you can leave your questions and concerns there. And also, as always, support the Patreon channel right there. And you can go to friendlyatheist.com and subscribe to the newsletter. But yeah, let me know if you can or cannot hear the live stream right now, really quick. I would appreciate it before we get started with stuff. And then we'll get started in just a moment. Den's gonna leave and come back. All right. But everyone else sounds like they can hear, I think. I'll give it just another few seconds before I get started, and I'll look at the comments just to make sure everyone can hear okay. So many things to talk about, and I want to make sure Den is able to hear it. And if not, we'll figure it out from there. Den, hello again. Den's back on my end. You say a bit muffled. Huh. Testing. I will vamp for just a minute longer and then we'll get started because we have much to discuss today. All right. I am hearing Den mostly positive things, so I feel like he just left. He'll come back. I'm gonna go ahead and get started, and we will see what we can do. Let me pull up the first story here. And then we'll go. I hope everyone's having a good one today. I can hear where I am. There's rain everywhere where I'm at outside of Chicago. Okay, we're going to get started and Den will come back and we will figure it out. Den's back. Den's somewhere. Den's figuring it out. Den, I'm going to get started, and you can pop in and out as you need to, and we'll figure it out from there. Otherwise, hopefully, we'll make this work. Okay. I have to tell you about a big revelation that just came out this morning, and it involves a major survey that came out last year and had the entire world of religious demographics in like a tizzy. Here is the story that came out last year in the UK. Basically, there was a group called the Bible Society. Yeah, it's a Christian nonprofit. It's UK based. And last April, they released this report saying that young people in England and Wales were going back to church. Young people, like 18 to 24, were going back to church. And that was reversing a downward trend that we had been seeing for decades. They called it the quiet revival. And specifically in this thing, I want to show you right over here. Look at this. The report in 30 seconds. What did they say at the beginning of this report? Because this feels important. I'll scroll down just a little bit here. Look at the top of your screen. Where once we saw aging congregations and a steady decline in attendance, we see dramatic growth led by the young. Where once we saw apathy or even hostility to Christianity in the Bible, we see increased openness, again, among the young. You may have heard the rumblings and rumors emerging over the past few years. You may have even noticed it in your own community, or it might have passed you by entirely, but this data shows that it is real. This is the quiet revival. And they say one more thing I want to show you near the bottom here. Right at the bottom. Challenges remain for the church and civic society in responding to this quiet revival, but its reality can no longer be denied. Wow. So apparently the Bible Society had actual survey data that showed young people were going back to church, contrary to what all the other researchers had to say. And this was great news if you're a religious person who is looking around saying, why are my churches empty, right? That was a big deal. Now, other researchers that had put out surveys, that had done surveys, they said, yeah, there's a hint that the trends may be slowing down. Like the Pew Research Center had a poll that showed instead of organized Christianity going down, 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 there was a slight bump. But 1 point does not a trend make, right? So no one else was seeing this except for the Bible Society. So the question is, where were they getting this information from? And before I show you that, let me show you the big graphs that had everyone shocked. This is one of them right here. Check this out. The rise in regular church going. And if you look on the far left of your screen, you could see they are comparing 2018 numbers to 2024. And in 2018, they said 8% of people said they were Christians who went to church at least once a month. But in dark blue, in 2024, it was 12%. So that was a jump overall. But look at the numbers for people ages 18 to 24. Only 4% in 2018, only 4% of people 18 to 24 were Christians who attended church. That number had jumped to 16% by 2024. And right next to it, you see the columns for ages 25 to 34. It jumped from 4% to 13%. So this is a big deal. I'm going to pause this for just a second and say, Den, does it look like other people are also having this issue? You can give me a thumbs up or something. If you can hear me, Den, can you give me a thumbs up? Should I restart everything? Sorry, Den, say that one more time to me. Should I restart or should I keep going? I'll trim out this part if I need to. Sorry, one moment while we figure this out. You're hearing good sound. Thank you, Sarah. I'll chop all this out in a little bit. Den is saying his sound is being weird, but everyone else is saying it's okay. So maybe I will keep going and I'll cut this out later. Okay. So it looks like young people are having this renaissance when it comes to going back to church. There was one other graph I want to show you as well. More young people are believing in God. Look at the change from the light blue bar to the dark blue bar for 18 to 24 and 25 to 34. Like those numbers are jumping quite a bit. So this is what the Bible Society was pointing to. And they're saying, look at this. Young people are going back to church more than ever before. So the big question is, where are they getting all this information from? Because if they're just making up the numbers, no one should believe them. But they said, you can count on us when we tell you all this because we had a contract with a legit polling firm. And the polling firm in question was YouGov, which you may have heard of because they do a lot of surveys in the US as well. Like YouGov has a pretty good reputation. And in fact, in this report, they even had an FAQ where they said this: is the methodology sound? They said, yes, both surveys from 2018 and 2024 we draw from are based on large representative samples from one of the country's leading research companies. They said they are highly reliable. And then the FAQ asked, could there be something about the sample? Maybe you had a weird sample. And they said at the bottom here, I'll remove myself, at this sample size and the way the YouGov panel is built and maintained, this is again highly unlikely. Highly unlikely that anything weird would happen with just this sample. So the Bible Society put that out there. They called it this quiet, they called it, again, this quiet revolution, this quiet revival. And you can predict what happened right after that. They got a ton of great headlines, which is exactly what they wanted. Let me show you a couple. This is from the Gospel Coalition, but the Quiet Revival break spiritual stillness in the UK. Here's another one from Premier Christianity. The UK is experiencing a quiet revival. It's taken me by surprise. Here's another one from Baptist News Global. In England and Wales, a quiet revival is boosting faith. Here's another one from the right-wing publication First Things, where they basically said, I want to read you one passage here because it made me laugh. This is the very end. Look at this last paragraph, trying to explain what the hell's going on. God's ways are not our ways. We wring our hands over the damage that polarization is doing to our societies. We fight against the excesses of woke ideology. We're not wrong to do so. Yet it seems that the Almighty in his providence has been preparing the ground to be sown anew. The progressive assault on our natural loves is becoming unbearable. The West is being convulsed by an agony born of utopian ambitions for liberation that have curdled into ignoble and debasing failures. I think they get paid by the syllable when you write for this magazine. But the Greek root for crisis also means decision. A growing minority, especially men, are searching for the solid foundations on which to build a new and very different future. All right, sure. There was also a lot of positive coverage in mainstream publications. This is from Sky News. How did Gen Z become the most religious generation alive? From The Telegraph, the strange rebirth of Christian England. There was also The Guardian. Look at this. I'm delighted to see Gen Z men in the UK flocking back to church. I just hope it's for the right reasons. So, the survey had an impact. The Bible Society got the headlines they were looking for because in every one of these articles, they mentioned the Bible Society and this survey. And of course, that's what you want when you put out a press release this juicy, right? So this is the big deal. This is why this survey was so damning if you're someone like me a year ago, because it suggested all the work we're doing to get people away from organized religion is backfiring. They're now going back to church. So I will say it wasn't all positive. Like some people were critical right after this survey came out. Here's Humanist UK at the time saying Gen Z religious revival, the evidence is incomplete. And what Humanist UK was saying is that we've seen a lot of survey data that really doesn't support the conclusions that the Bible Society is finding. So it's just kind of weird to us. And we've spoken to a lot of researchers trying to figure out, are we wrong or are they wrong? And all of these people are suggesting there's got to be something wrong with the Bible Society's data because it's so inconsistent with the numbers we see everywhere else. I mean, it wasn't just Humanist UK. Look at, these are other sociologists and people who study this stuff. Is there a religious revival in Britain? This briefing paper explores religious attitudes in Britain, drawing on a different set of data. And they said this data doesn't say what the Bible Society found. Here's another one from The Conversation. Is there really a religious revival in England? Why I'm skeptical of a new report. Even the Pew Research Center got in on the action. Has there been a Christian revival among young adults in the UK? Recent surveys may be misleading because the Pew Research Center is saying our data doesn't show this at all. Okay, so this is the conversation that has been happening over the past year, over the course of several months, because all of these people, all of these skeptics are saying, I don't know if I trust this, but also we like numbers, we like data. We see the data, it just seems weird. Like this doesn't seem like it's getting replicated anywhere else. Well, after all that, guess what the Bible Society finally announced today on March 26th? They basically said, hey, all of you people who are saying our data might be wrong, turns out you might have a point. Check this out. This just came out today. Statement from Paul Williams, Chief Executive Officer of the Bible Society. Earlier this month, YouGov informed Bible Society that the 2024 survey sample on which our report, The Quiet Revival, was based was faulty, and it can no longer be regarded as a reliable source of information about the spiritual landscape in Britain. And then they go on to say this, because they're very much saying, you guys don't blame us, it's not our fault. Over a 15-month period, Bible Society repeatedly sought and received assurances from YouGov regarding both the robustness of the methodology and the reliability of the report's conclusions. It was only at the beginning of March, earlier this month, that YouGov confirmed that it failed to activate key quality control technologies that protect the sample from a wide range of errors, and this undermines the reliability of the results. So they're throwing YouGov under the bus because YouGov told them, yeah, of course our data is good. It turns out YouGov apparently forgot to do a good survey switch in their office, and they just got bad information. I don't know how that happens at a big, reliable firm like this, but that's apparently what they said. More specifically, here is what happened. They even quote, the Bible Society even quotes the CEO of YouGov saying, the Bible Society has at all times accurately and responsibly reported the data we supplied to them. So they did nothing wrong. The fault is YouGov's. And the Bible Society just put out a brand new report today, basically explaining what the hell happened. Here's what happened with YouGov's survey. The poll was supposed to exclude people who are not living in the UK, who complete the survey more than once, and who clearly are giving random answers to the questions they're asking in an online poll. Like they just click, send, because maybe they got an incentive for finishing it. But YouGov's supposed to toss out all those answers. They did not do that in this case, and that's why the 2024 numbers are effectively worthless. Now, the Bible Society says, we are going to work with YouGov to do this again, and we're hopefully going to have survey results sometime later this year. We'll see about that. We'll see what it says. But to the question, could you have noticed earlier that there was a mistake in the data? They actually responded to that question right here. Could Bible Society have spotted the error? No. We exercised exceptional care when it came to this research. We delayed publication of the Quiet Revival for 3 months while we investigated YouGov's data thoroughly. Because we have an academically trained research team, we were able to interrogate the data rigorously, asking questions about weighting, the possibility of sample error, panel drift, dropout, response bias, and questionnaire effect. However, as a client, we were not able to access the systems YouGov uses to detect ineligible respondents and had to rely on their assurances that these had been properly applied. This turned out not to be the case. YouGov has confirmed that it was impossible for us, as their client, to have been aware of the error. So it's not our fault, you guys. We're the Bible people. We don't make mistakes. We're infallible. So that statement strikes me as very weird because they say they have experts who understand survey data and religious trends, but you know who else knows about how to interpret numbers and surveys? People who don't work for the Bible Society. And the people who don't work for the Bible Society had written articles over the past year saying, we don't trust this data. It seems very sketchy to us. Why didn't the Bible Society talk to anyone outside their organization who might not have a vested interest in the results, right? Maybe an organization whose entire existence is built on spreading unverifiable beliefs that are not grounded in fact should not be relying on their own research team to dive into facts. That's like Ken Ham saying, here at the Creation Museum, we have a crack team of experts who know a lot about evolution. It's like, I don't know that you do. Sure, they may have credentials on paper, but if they're working for you, I don't know about that. Maybe we should look elsewhere. Like, if you know how to separate fact from fiction, you probably wouldn't be working for the Bible Society now, would you? Now, here's the other thing that struck me as really funny about this retraction. In the report, one of the things they point out that I want to share with you here, if I could find this, is that at the end of the day, after all of this, and of course I can't find it as I'm looking. Here we go. Let me show you this bit right here. This is their. Here we go. Let me show you this from their new report, which is 43 pages long and came out today. And by the way, the 43 pages, it's like padded with big pictures and not a lot of actual information on what went wrong. But look at this. All right. Our conclusion is that the core themes and messages arising from the Quiet Revival report are substantially true. So the data was wrong, but we still feel like kids are coming back to church. We still think our conclusions that we drew from the bad information are still basically true. Like, that's the most Christian-y answer you could possibly give at this point. The data was wrong, but we still like our conclusions. The other thing that is really funny to show you here on the next page, the drama of the error in the 2024 YouGov survey should not be allowed to obscure the real story of the actual changes taking place in the spiritual and religious landscape of Britain. My dudes, it is the error can very much obscure whatever story, whatever narrative you want to go with, because your conclusions don't make sense if they're built on a foundation that has turned out to be unreliable. That's how data works. Like, how is that for spin? The data is garbage, but we still want to believe there's a religious revival, so let's just go off of the vibes. What's wrong with the vibes? We'll go with the vibes. At one point, to try to justify that their vibes are good, they even say, even Richard Dawkins is describing himself as a cultural Christian, which made me laugh because he's been saying that for over 2 decades now, and it still doesn't mean people are going back to church. So you may be wondering, Humanist UK was pretty outspoken about how the initial data was bad. What do they have to say about all this? Oh, you better believe they are taking a victory lap of sorts today. Bible Society retracts false Quiet Revival claims. Here's Andrew Copson, the chief executive of the group. Look at this. This is both validation and vindication. We need to be absolutely clear. There is no revival of Christianity in Britain. For almost a year, Humanist UK has taken a rational, evidence-based approach, repeatedly and rigorously explaining why the Bible Society's claims do not stand up. They chose not to engage with that evidence. Much of the damage has already been done. Global media reports have too often and wrongly jumped on the bandwagon of a supposed Christian revival in the UK. That must stop. At a time when truth in these social questions has never been more politically important, everyone has the obligation to be rigorous in their presentation of data in the public realm and the claims they make for it. The UK is not a Christian country, and our politics must reflect that. If we fail to recognize the plural and mainly non-religious nature of our society, not only will we be living a lie as a country, we will be undermining our ability to work for peace and cohesion in our diverse society. That's a very polite way of saying, we told you. What the hell? You should have listened to us. We're the people who understand how numbers and facts work. So, love to see that. So the bottom line is there is no quiet revival of religion in the UK, or you could say it's so quiet it doesn't exist at all. And the thing is, this is not just some numerical methodological blunder. This is a whole failure by a lot of people, by religious advocacy groups that don't understand how to contextualize and interpret evidence. A failure by gullible media outlets that just took the press release and ran with it because they liked the clickbaitiness of the conclusions. Like, this narrative about a religious revival really blew up long before the underlying data was properly vetted. Pro-Christian outlets treated it like divine vindication, and their critics were treated as if they were unwilling to deal with the facts. It's actually the reverse. The critics had it right. And this has been going on for over a year. And the sad part about this is like any lie that goes viral, the retraction probably won't go viral at all. How many people are going to see from the same media outlets that, hey, remember that story we published a year ago and you all shared it? Yeah, it turns out all of that was a lie. I guarantee you most of these publications are not going to write that story. That's why this admission, it falls short of what the Bible Society ought to be doing. If they want to demonstrate integrity, they can't just blame YouGov for the bad data and then cling to the same conclusions. They should concede that their central claims remain unproven, that their critics had a good point, that they overhyped the story, that people should not automatically believe anything else the Bible Society says, not about survey results, not about the Bible, and that whenever the next YouGov reports come out, the Bible Society should make sure to share it with some experts outside their ministry, people whose allegiance is not to the religion, before blasting it out to the world. Like, the biggest problem with religion in general is that it teaches people to buy into a series of lies, even when the evidence shows otherwise. And in a way, the Bible Society fell victim to the exact same logical fallacy that makes them buy into the Bible in the first place. So, it's infuriating. I'm glad they did a retraction, but it's too little too late. And they're not going to go hard on sharing the retraction for the next several months. But it's a reminder that sometimes when you see these stories about religion making a comeback, you got to look at where that data is coming from, because it may not be accurate. Okay, let's stop there. What questions do we got here? Den can hear me. I think we are looking. There we go. YouTube feed is coming through crystal clear. Going to watch from there. A little bit of a lag between us. All right, fair enough. Den, I will live with that. We'll be fine. Do we have any questions on this? Even if it wasn't, the caveats in the survey make it misleading to say that people are becoming Christian again specifically. Not really a revival. Yeah, remember, the surveys they were basing this off of said, are you a Christian? Are you going back to church? And if you say yes to both of those, they counted you as a yes. That's not the same as saying everyone, like, there's a rise in everyone going back to church. And there are lots of reasons people may be returning, even if there's any support to that conclusion. It's not necessarily because they suddenly believe in bullshit again. Maybe after COVID, they're like, I miss being around people, and there's not a lot of places to hang out, and my friends go there, so I'll go. I mean, that's a possibility, but it wasn't even suggested as an answer. YouGov or the Bible Society? I really don't know which to trust less. You know, as in my experience, YouGov has been overall fine. This is the first time I've seen survey results that YouGov is admitting we screwed up on, and good on them for saying that. But in general, they've been pretty reliable. I'm just surprised they didn't notice that there was an issue until like many, many months after the story went out. Even if they retract the article, it won't stop churches from citing it for the next 37 years. No kidding. You know, David Barton is going to start sharing the first story with everyone he talks to for the rest of his life, because it doesn't matter what the follow-up story is. They only care about the headline they want, and they know that the audience they speak to will never look into this stuff for themselves. So, yes, you are right. That is one of the problems here. The Bible Society is feeding into a myth again. There is definitely a revival of misinformation. Yeah, no kidding. At a time when we are just inundated with bad information, like, and there are so many people who work so hard to debunk misinformation, it is so sad that an organization that said we want to commission a survey to see what the data shows, and they're the ones spreading misinformation this time around. Not necessarily through fault of their own, But even now they're saying, yeah, but at least our conclusions were right, right? Oh, thank you for that donation. Religion for Breakfast got a good video on this. You know what? I heard that Religion for Breakfast, Andrew, had a good um, video on this, but I can't remember if it's about the original data or the criticism about it, or I don't think it was on the retraction yet. But yeah, go watch his video. I mean, his channel's great, so go watch it. I just read Pete Kegset's pastor wished death to Talarico. That story I will cover later tonight. So we're going to get to that. All right. Anything else there? The world show seems to be going crazy right now. Sometimes I wish that these chats lasted longer because I'm such a good host. I appreciate that. And I love that there's a community in this chat, in all the YouTube comment threads and the chats going on in the live chats. And that's why Den is awesome, because he's there to moderate and check it all out. So I agree. It would be nice to have these communities. I don't know how much longer I could do this than I already am, but I do like it. All right, I'm jumping to another story. 1 second. Got a lot of tabs to close. All right. I have to tell you about a situation that just happened in Minnesota. It's probably not one of those stories that's going to make a lot of headlines, but I feel like you need to hear what this lady said. Here's what happened. Earlier this week in the Minnesota State House, there was a subcommittee hearing or a committee hearing on capital investment. You know, what money should we use to build up stuff in our state, infrastructure, things like that. And one of the topics that they were discussing was the impact of climate change. And to that end, they invited researchers from the University of Minnesota. They had asked these researchers, can you write up a report on the impact climate change is going to have on our state and what we as lawmakers need to do to try to fix as much as we can, what's within our purview to fix up. And so these researchers were now speaking to the lawmakers about their discoveries, what they found. It was experts speaking to policymakers. That is exactly the way government should be working, right? And it's also a matter of urgency, because let me show you this. Just last week, I believe, this report came out. This is a report from the Minnesota Climate Adaptation and Resilience Cost Study from the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. And I just want you to look at the second bullet point right here at the top of your screen. Failure to adapt to climate change will be costly. This report found that the quantified impacts of climate change in Minnesota without further adaptation investment are $17 to $22 billion a year by mid-century, and it'll go up to $36 to $57 billion per year by the end of the century. So if you don't take care of climate change now, Minnesota lawmakers, it's going to cost the state tens of billions of dollars between 2040 and the rest of the century. And so, like, there is a financial cost to not doing anything about climate change, which tracks. Like, that's what climate scientists have been warning us about for a long time now. Unfortunately, Republicans don't seem to care. So, with that as the backdrop, this was a really important committee hearing because these lawmakers need to know what they need to do. And so, the person who is the co-chair of this committee is a woman named Mary Franson. She's a Republican, and she's been in office since 2011, and she's kind of carved out a space for herself in the legislature as one of the least thoughtful members of the legislature. She has pushed anti-abortion bills. There was a House chaplain who delivered an invocation honoring Earth Day, and she called it a pagan holiday. She doesn't like trans people, as you would expect. She compared survivors of a mass shooting to Hitler Youth. That's the sort of person we are talking about here. And I mention her because after these researchers gave their presentation on climate change, Franzen basically gave the closing remarks in which she effectively said, I don't care about anything you people just said. Why? Because, and I'm paraphrasing here, because climate change is a hoax. How does she know it's a hoax? Because she's a Christian, and the Bible says climate change is not how the world's gonna end. And let me play you what she actually said to the committee. You gotta see this.
Members, the climate is always changing, and 10,000 years ago, there were glaciers covering the state. And if you don't know what a glacier is, it's a big block of ice, log of ice, right? Well, they're not here in the state anymore. I mean, up by Representative Scraba, there's a park that talks about the glaciers that were up in Itasca County. But what doesn't change, my friends, and that's why when we talk about climate change, I don't get upset about it, I don't get worked up about it, is because my faith is not in climate change. It's not in scientists dictating what we should and should not do to save the environment, because my faith is in Jesus Christ, right? He's the same today, tomorrow, and forever, yesterday. And so, you know, if you've read the good book, you know how it ends. It's not with climate change. And that's my closing speech.
My faith is not in climate change. My faith is in the Bible. My faith is in Jesus. What a completely pointless, useless thing to say. You don't need to have faith in science. The science is there whether you like it or not. The Bible, you could take or leave. It doesn't matter. And somehow that was less offensive than when she said just like a couple of years ago, climate change is a scam pushed by commies. That's also her. You can tell by the American flags around her Twitter username right there. I will say I do appreciate that the more liberal party in the Minnesota legislature called her out on this. And this is from the floor leader, Jamie Long, who issued the following statement about Franzen's weird comments. Representative Franzen's extreme remarks have no place in any area of serious policy making. Minnesotans believe in science and are concerned about the scientific consensus that climate change is causing real harm to our state. Scientists aren't concerned about climate change because the world is ending. They are concerned about the quality of life for people living on our planet now and in the future. So this lady didn't even know what she was talking about. And they say at the end here, for a co-chair of the committee charged with making these critical investments to turn a blind eye to this reality and undermine the critical planning necessary to protect our infrastructure is deeply concerning. And that's a very polite way to put that, because you could just call her crazy. You can just say she shouldn't be in public office if she holds these views. She shouldn't be the committee chair if she's not going to listen to the experts brought forth in front of the committee. Like, Minnesota is very lucky to have a whole bunch of lawmakers who actually care about evidence and expertise, since we have learned, and we've known for a long time, that Republicans are determined to ignore all of that collective wisdom in favor of their preferred brand of mythology. And I think the thing that bothered me most wasn't even the Jesus comments. It's that this lawmaker had experts right in front of her. They could have answered her questions if she didn't understand climate change. And what did she do? She didn't ask them questions about, like, how do you know any of this stuff is actually happening? She just sat there, ignored everything they said, and then concluded that no one should listen to what they have to say. Like, she's so convinced she knows more about climate than the people who have dedicated their entire careers to studying climate science. Like, that's the sort of right-wing hubris that is destroying this country. There's an actual climate scientist, Professor Michael Mann, who said this in response to her comments. Nuclear warheads aren't in the Bible either. I guess we're safe. Yeah, well said. I want to laugh more, but it's like, it's so not funny. And this sort of thing has been going on for such a long time because she is not the first Christian lawmaker to just deny science because it wasn't convenient. Do you remember this? Not that. This one right here from Michelle Bachmann, who said climate change is a fraud because God says we will never be flooded. This is from 2019 when she was a lawmaker. She basically said, the very covenant was established by God and Noah. And that covenant was that sin was so gross in the world that God had to bring about judgment, and then he had to bring about salvation. And from there came Abraham. God put a rainbow in the sky as a result of his covenant, and he said very clearly to the entire world, never again will there be judgment. Never again will the world be flooded. See, everybody? Facts. And Michelle Bachmann's like, see, I told a story, therefore my beliefs are valid and climate change is not real. And that lady was in Congress. But wait, there's also Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who said in 2019, after AOC delivered a whole speech about the impact and dangers of climate change, what did Sarah Huckabee Sanders say? Go away, ad. Look, I don't think we're going to listen to her on much of anything, particularly not on matters we're going to leave in the hands of a much, much higher authority. And certainly not listen to the freshman congresswoman on when the world may end. We're focused on what's happening in the world right now. Oh my God. I hate that woman so much. But again, she's just wrong. Like, climate change is happening in the world right now. It's not about the end of the world. It's about how awful the globe is going to be in a handful of years. It's happening now. It is destroying entire states and countries as we speak. There are nations that are going underwater. Florida is going to lose its land soon. So, utter ignorance. Not surprising, but utter ignorance from Sarah Huckabee Sanders. And this is when she was Donald Trump's press secretary. There's one more, of course. Some of you are old enough like me to remember this image of Senator James Inhofe bringing a snowball to the floor of the Senate as if to show, hey, look, it's like spring and I have a snowball here. So much for global warming. Haha, I have ice. Ice doesn't exist in the summer if global warming is true. Like, nothing he did made any sense. But this is what happens with Republicans. They don't care about facts. They don't care about science. And they're the ones making decisions that impact climate science and climate change and how all of us get to live. And there are so many more examples where that came from. Like, you could make a Christian argument that God gave us the power to recognize the impact of oil drilling and fossil fuels and things we are doing to our environment. And God gave us brains so we could fix it before it's too late. You could make that argument. None of these Christians want to make that argument because the party of personal responsibility never wants to clean up the mess that it is creating. The party that loves God will never hear the word no when it comes to something they really want to do. You know? Oh, this argument by Franson, it's the same argument creationists make whenever they say evolution can't be true because I've never seen with my own eyes one species give birth to another species. Like, that's not at all how it works, but that's basically what this lady is saying here. Climate change must not be real because I don't see glaciers melting right in front of me. It's like, they kind of are. They're happening pretty fast, but just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not true. We have evidence to back it up. But that's why you got to stop voting for right-wing conspiracy theorists, because they would rather close their eyes and shut off their brains than see the disasters unfolding right in front of them. All right, I will stop there. What questions we got for this story? It is infuriating. I'm glad she explained what the glacier is. Yeah, no one in Minnesota can possibly know what cold weather is like. It's a weird thing to do. So she hopes to be raptured then. I mean, I hope she's raptured soon. I don't know what she thinks about it all. All the people who believe in the rapture, I wish they were raptured. She's probably one of those Christians that says science is a religion. I believe you are not far off. I think she has made comments either exactly like that or at least paraphrasing that idea. But yeah, they think science is a religion and no amount of data is enough to sway them. I swear so much of politics is just contrarianism. Like if one side supports something, the other side can't. That's very much where the Republican Party is right now. If Democrats like it and it's going to help their states, oh, like Medicare for all, it'll help the people in your state. But they can't bring themselves to support it because Democrats like it. Oh, the Green New Deal, which would help red states a lot, they don't like it because Democrats support it. Like everything Donald Trump does is contrarianism. If Democrats like it, it can't be good. So if Democrats want to fund the TSA right now, Donald Trump doesn't want to do it. He told Republicans not to support that bill. And what did he do? Before I came on air tonight, he said he's signing some executive order to pay TSA agents, which means he could have paid them all along, but he was really trying to blame Democrats for it because this is just a game to him. All right, I'm jumping to another story. Let's see. By the way, reflexive contrarianism also explains the problem with a lot of those new atheists as well. Like, they miss being right about something everyone else was wrong about, which was accurate when it came to God. And then they're like, what else is everyone for? Oh, they're for civil rights for trans people? I guess I'm going to be against that now. Like, if you understand that they just miss being right about stuff and telling people they're wrong, that explains so much of where like Richard Dawkins, Bill Maher, etc., where they've all gone over the past several years. Okay. I have to tell you about the biggest rabbit hole I went down this week. And I'm going to show you a clip in a little bit and you'll understand why I started digging into this guy. But this whole story revolves around one dude, and it's this guy right here. He's a pastor out of California. His name is Che Ahn. He is a self-described Christian prophet. He is a leader in the New Apostolic Reformation, which is a really hard right-wing extremist Pentecostal branch of Christianity that really believes in miracles. They believe that Christians need to take over everything. They believe in the seven mountains mandate, which is Christians need to take over the seven mountains of society, politics, media, business, entertainment, etc. So Che Ahn is a leader in that movement. And he recently decided he should run for governor of California because Gavin Newsom is term limited out. There is an open call for who's going to be governor of that state. So he announced not that long ago, he wanted to run for governor. And I need to tell you before I get into all that, Che Ahn has been interested in politics for a long time, long enough anyway, to the point where on January 5th, the day before Trump and his goons tried to storm the Capitol, Che Ahn appeared at a rally, the rally for Trump supporters, and this is what he said at the time. We are here to change history. Che Ahn, he told the Stop the Steal rally a day before the insurrection. He predicted that we're going to rule and reign through President Trump and under the lordship of Jesus Christ. Che Ahn spoke to the eventual rioters the day before the insurrection occurred. So that's disturbing. He also said in that speech that the election was stolen from Trump and that it was part of the, quote, most egregious fraud in American history. And so last July, Che Ahn announced he was going to run to succeed Gavin Newsom as governor of California. He said God spoke to him, and he called on Che-An to mount a campaign. He even said in this opening speech, like, my first reaction, I said, Lord, please, not this. I'll do anything you ask me to do, but not run for governor. But I guess God spoke to him and said, nope, that's totally what I want you to do, because God never says no to the thing you totally want to do. And so for the past several months, Che-An has been running for governor. He's campaigning at churches across the state. He's fundraising all over the country. He's bragged about getting Mike Huckabee's endorsement. Let me show you his campaign website, because he says this on it. Look at the bottom. California stands at a crossroads. Will we be a state where biblical values and lawful order are respected, or a state where the rule of law collapses under political expediency? Like, oh my God, California doesn't need biblical values. And if you care about the rule of law, why the hell are you supporting Donald Trump? But that's Che-An. That's what he's doing. And if you look at the events, I also want to show you one other thing. Like, if you look at his website for the events that he's going to, the events that he's doing, there is no shortage of events here. Like, he's going to a Republican women's forum. He's speaking at Hope Fest LA. And I think these are all next month. Like, and those are just future events. He's done a lot of them in the past as well. So my point is, this dude is running for governor. I'm going to skip ahead and tell you his campaign has raised nearly $900,000 during his campaign for governor. They've raised a lot of money. And so the reason I started digging into this is because last week, he was at a church run by Nebraska preacher Hank Kunneman. And I've talked about Hank Kunneman before. He's also a self-described prophet who thinks he could perform miracles, and he's a con artist, in my opinion. But I want to show you what Che-An did when he was at this church, because he did two things. He started healing people in the audience by blowing them. Yeah, you heard me. And second, I'll show you. And second, Hank Kunneman told people during the service that they should donate money to his campaign, that they should support his campaign, because the Johnson Amendment doesn't matter anymore, apparently. Let me show you this clip so you could see what Che-An was doing, because it's just plain weird.
Holy Spirit, come. Holy Spirit, come. Holy Spirit, come. Holy Spirit, come. Receive it. Holy Spirit, come. There it is. There it is. Take it. Holy Spirit, come. Take it. Holy Spirit, come.
And as it is 3:22 today, I pray, Luke 3:22, Spirit of God, rest upon this man, rest upon his candidacy, and Lord, speak from the heavens your favor as you spoke and said to your son Yeshua in Luke 3:22. On this day, declare over this man, declare over his candidacy, declare over California.
I had to watch that, so you have to watch it. But basically, Hank Kunneman was promoting his campaign from the stage. It's a weird clip, and it made me laugh because it's all weird. But I saw that clip on over the weekend, and I remember my first thought is, oh, hey, it's Che-An. He's running for governor of California. What's he up to these days? Like, how's he doing? Because the primary in California is not until June, so we must be campaigning. And I saw that like this week, he went on a Christian talk show where he told his audience, vote for me, I'm running for governor of California. He is appearing at CPAC this week. He is a speaker at CPAC. And let me get a couple things out of the way. If you don't know about California politics right now, one is that Che-An is almost certainly going to lose. Mostly because no one knows who the hell he is, even among Republicans. And there are other Republicans who are polling higher. So this was always a long shot campaign. I know that. He has to know that. But whatever, people are allowed to campaign. It's not a crime to run and lose. I'm just telling you, he was not going to win. And it's also, I would say, it's not out of the ordinary these days for someone to say, I may be polling low right now, but give me a couple months. Let me cook. Maybe I'll pull a Zoran Mamdani and jump from like 1% support to as much support as I need to win the race. So that's part one. He's not really going to win. But the second thing is California has a very weird way of doing elections like this. When it comes to governor, they're going to have a primary in June. And it's not that Democrats vote in the Democratic primary and Republicans vote in the Republican primary. Everyone who wants to vote in the primary votes for whoever the hell they want to. And the top two candidates who make it out of the primary will be on the ballot for governor. Now, in an ideal world, both of those candidates are Democrats and Republicans don't even have a candidate to support. So they stay home. And that means their chances of winning any statewide election are lower. I like that option. However, right now, if you look at the polling, there are literally 2 Republicans in the race who have any chance of winning. And there are a hell of a lot of Democrats in the race because they all want to be the next Gavin Newsom. You got Eric Swalwell, who's a congressman. You got Katie Porter, who's a former congresswoman. There's a lot of Democrats, and they're all splitting the votes. So if the primary happened today, there's a very real chance that 2 Republicans would take the top spots and be the only candidates in November. That is a disaster waiting to happen, but that is a separate story. I just wanted to get that out of the way. Okay, so the California primary is in the news for all these reasons I'm mentioning. And then when I saw that clip of Cheon miraculously healing or pretending to heal all those people, I'm like, how is he doing these days in that polling? And then I looked at the polls and Cheon wasn't anywhere on the polls. Even when they say like, it's not the top 5 candidates, it's the top 20 candidate. He's nowhere on the list. And I'm like, is he really doing that badly? That he's so far off the grid here? That's weird, right? And then I discovered out of nowhere that the Secretary of State released a list of all the candidates earlier this week. This is a preliminary list of who is able to run in the primary. It's a very long list. Like every candidate is on here. And I'm just scrolling through. There's a lot of them on here, but this is alphabetical order by last name, which means Cheon should appear between these 2 guys. He should appear between those 2 public candidates, but he's not on that list, which is weird. Why is Cheon not on that list? If you want to say like maybe they went by a different name, a birth name, so I promise you, he's nowhere on the list. There are 60 people, 60 people on that list. He ain't one of them. So I'm like, wait a minute. If he's not on the list to be on the primary ballot, why is he going around everywhere raising money and telling people he's running for governor? Is something shady happening here? That's a good question, right? Well, it turns out I did get an answer to this, and I won't bore you with every detail, but apparently earlier this month, there was a lawsuit filed in court. Look at the date right above my head. This was filed March 10th, about 2 weeks ago. And basically, this was filed with the Superior Court of the state of California by Cheon against the Secretary of State. And what it says, and this shocked me, is that Cheon did not turn in all the paperwork he needed to get on the primary ballot. Apparently, one of the things you need to turn in is like, a handful of signatures that support your candidacy. You got to turn in those signatures. Every candidate everywhere knows that. He did that. But in California, you also have to turn in the past 5 years of your tax returns if you want to be on the ballot. And I think they passed that law in 2019 in order to try to make it hard for Donald Trump to appear on California's ballot. But in any case, there's a law in California that says you got to turn in your last 5 years of income tax returns. Cheon never got that memo. He never turned it in. And this lawsuit said, you guys, we didn't know we had to turn that stuff in. We read the California Constitution, and it said if you want to be governor, you have to like be a citizen. You can't be a felon who's committed election fraud or something like that. And like he passed all of those qualifications, so we figured he's good to go. And his team, his campaign team, turned in everything, and they said, did we turn in everything? And the Secretary of State's office was like, yeah, it looks like you did. We'll tell you if we're missing anything. And it turns out the Secretary of State's office emailed the campaign about 2 days before the deadline and said, hey, we never got your tax returns. Are you going to turn those into us? And they said, we didn't see the email until after the deadline. So like, don't blame us. So they filed a lawsuit saying we deserve to be on the primary ballot because it's not our fault we don't know how to read. And the judge in that case did not rule on this matter until March 23rd, which is earlier this week. And this judge, you could see the date there, this judge issued a very short ruling. This is it. It's literally like a paragraph, but just look at the very bottom. After hearing argument from both parties, the court issued an oral ruling denying Che-An's emergency verified petition. Basically saying, no, buddy, you screwed up. You didn't turn in the paperwork. You're not going to be on the ballot. That's the end of it. So imagine my surprise when I'm looking into this dude and I realize he didn't turn in the work and now he's not going to be on the ballot. What is he going to tell all these people when he speaks at their events? Is he still going to fundraise? Because he's making a lot of money from this. He literally opened up a new campaign office in Koreatown outside of Los Angeles like last week. He firmly believes he's running for governor. So if he's not on the primary ballot, what's he going to tell everybody, right? So let me tell you, this little rabbit hole I go down, I spoke to his campaign manager. I spoke to Che-An's lawyer trying to get to the bottom of what the hell is this guy doing at this point. And I will tell you, the lawyer told me we're appealing the judge's ruling. We are saying this is an emergency because today, Thursday, March 26th, is the day for the Secretary of State to finalize the list of who is on the ballot. So the lawyer went to court. He appealed that ruling and said, hey, appellate court, you need to get on this fast because my client needs to be on the ballot and we have until Thursday to do it. Well, guess what happened late last night? The appellate court chimed in and said, no, that's it. It was a very quick, it wasn't even a ruling. It was a one sentence, we're not taking up your stupid little case here. So they lost again. And today's the deadline, which again means Che-An is not going to be on this ballot. And when I read the filing from his lawyer to the appellate court, they went into detail about saying, we didn't know we had to turn in the paperwork. After we found out you needed the income tax returns, his campaign manager drove to the Secretary of State's office the next day and turned them in, but it was too late, so it didn't matter. And they're also, the argument they were making is the Constitution says these are the qualifications you need to be governor. The legislature, they're arguing, is not allowed to make up additional hurdles that candidates have to jump over to get on the ballot. That was their argument. And the judges in all these cases have so far said, no, that's not how this works. The lawmakers are allowed to say you have to turn in some paperwork, just like they can say you have to turn in a petition with signatures if you want to be on the ballot. So no one is buying into this. And I will tell you, here's where it stands right now. Here's where we're at. Right now, Che-An has not told any of his followers he's not going to be on the ballot. I checked right before I went live tonight. He hasn't said a word about this, even though this has been in court for the past couple of weeks, and even though the judges have said no to him for the past several days. He hasn't said a word about it. He is still collecting money. He is still scheduled to appear at these events over the next couple of weeks talking about why he should be governor. So that's one thing. I have not heard from his lawyer. I did inquire, but I have not heard from his lawyer if they're going to try appealing this to the California Supreme Court. But at this point, the deadline has passed. I don't even know what the Supreme Court could do at this point. And I'm not sure they're going to say yes to Che-an when all these other judges have said no. So that's where we're at right now. I don't know what they're going to do here. I do find it interesting that Che-an's whole spiel during this entire campaign is God told me to run for office. But apparently, God didn't tell Che-an, hey, maybe file your paperwork correctly or hire a campaign manager who knows how this works. God is playing a huge practical joke on this dude, and he has not figured it out yet. So I am waiting to hear from Che-an about how he's going to tell his followers what's happening. Is he going to tell the truth and just say, my team made a mistake, therefore I won't be on the ballot? Is he going to say, California liberals are coming after me because they're scared of me, which is not true, but that is very Trumpy? Or is he going to blame Satan for putting up an additional hurdle in his way because Satan doesn't want him to be governor? I don't know what he's going to do. I'm very curious to see how this plays out. I will tell you, I asked his campaign manager when I talked to her on the phone, if Che-an is not on the ballot, what's going to happen to the $900,000 that you have raised so far that you haven't spent for campaign related reasons? And she said the right thing, which is we will disperse with the money in whatever legal way we need to, whether that's returning it to donors. I actually don't know how that works, or making sure it goes in the right place. Like, she made it sound like it's not like it's going into his pocket. And I will tell you, I have no reason to believe he's going to do anything shady with the money. I have no reason to think that. But it's a question I would like answered. So I just want you to keep your eye out on this for the next several days. What is Che-an going to say now that his campaign to be governor has ended and he hasn't told anybody about it? His whole thing has been speaking to Christian audiences, and right now he is radio silent for the past couple of days. I'm waiting. All right, I'll stop there. What questions we got about this story before we move on? We got a little bit of a lag here because of a technical issue, but the questions are coming. Literally, the guaranteed method of getting office as a Republican now is just Christianity. I mean, you're not wrong. That is very much how so many Republicans are running for office. They think that is a campaign strategy that works. And to be fair, it probably does. But I will say it's fascinating to watch James Tallarico's campaign in Texas, because in that one specific situation, that's not an argument a Republican can make effectively, because Tallarico's whole thing is, I am a Christian. I go to seminary school. I love God. I can quote the Bible from memory. So I would like to know how this strategy works when you're up against someone who is out and out a proud Christian. So curious to see how that works. But yeah, it's very much a shortcut to running for office, where you don't need to be smart. You don't need to know how to legislate. You just need to say, I like the Bible, therefore that qualifies me to do actual work. You would never allow that in like your surgeon, but apparently we allow it when it involves politicians. Get this guy cold medicine for the sneezing. Yeah, no kidding. Just sneezing, blowing on everybody. You know they did that during COVID too, right? Like, I find it hard to believe they don't realize how silly they look. I don't know about that. Self-awareness is not the strong suit of these kinds of Christians. They very much think it's totally normal to speak in tongues, to fall over backwards and the bodies hit the floor like that Benny Hinn video. I don't know if they're self-aware. So he isn't going to be on the ballot. I bet he'll stop going around and fundraising. I'm sure no chance he'll spin this as it's up to the faithful to get him into office. Now give money. I hear your sarcasm. I'm very serious when I say I don't know what he's going to do. I think I know what he's going to do, which is that. But I really want to know if he's going to take the responsible way out, admit this was a mistake on his end, and then say, I'm going to try to run for another office later, maybe. But I don't know that he's going to do that. Don't candidates get to pocket campaign cash after it's over? I believe the answer to that is a firm no. They can use it for future campaigns. I don't know all the rules here. What they can't do is take that money and cash out. That would be illegal. And I know laws don't matter anymore, but I don't think he can do that. Too bad the judge didn't order Che to stop spitting on people's faces. Yeah, I mean, you can do whatever you want in a church. The rules apply outside that building. All right, jump into another story here. Give me a second. I do not know the answer to that one. Sorry, I'm just trying to load one thing if I can. Here we go. All right. Oh, I'm so happy to talk about this guy. Do you remember Mark Robinson? Like, I swear, for a couple of years, he was the center of so many stories in our world. And he's back, baby. Let's talk about why. Let me remind you, if you don't remember 2 years ago, because you've tried to erase it from your memory, why was Mark Robinson in the news? He was in the news because from 2021 to 2025, this guy was the lieutenant governor of North Carolina. And in North Carolina, the way they do elections, you vote for the governor separately from the lieutenant governor. So the governor was a Democrat, but the lieutenant governor was Mark Robinson, a black conservative Republican. And people wanted the governor of North Carolina to maybe be part of Biden's cabinet, maybe take on another position, but he couldn't do it because if he stepped away as governor, Mark Robinson would take over, and no one wanted that to happen. So Mark Robinson was lieutenant governor for 4 years, and then he decided to run for governor. And this is in 2024. Republicans felt like they could capitalize on all the stuff happening with Joe Biden. It looked like it was going to be a good year for Republicans. And this was their guy who is a no apologies, hardcore conservative. And so Mark Robinson could have been the next big thing for Republicans. But then in the middle of his campaign, I want to remind you that what we knew about Mark Robinson at the time is that he is so extreme. And this is what Democrats were trying to use against him. Mark Robinson had said in recent years that if you force religion in public schools, it will prevent mass shootings. He said transgenderism and homosexuality is filth. He said the trans movement was demonic. He said it was full of the Antichrist spirit. He said straight couples are superior to gay ones. At one rally, he literally said some folks need killing. He denied the Holocaust. That was a real thing he said. He said that the accepted understanding of how many Jewish people were killed during World War II amounted to foolishness. He's also an anti-abortion nutcase. He said in 2021 that once a woman is pregnant, it's not her body anymore. So we knew all that. We knew how extreme this guy was. And this is the argument that Democrats were using against him. But then, as the campaign was heading into the later months, in September of 2024, a media outlet called The Assembly published a very interesting article about this guy. And this is the headline: ex-porn shop employees say Mark Robinson was a regular. He denies it. And I want to just scroll down to this bit right here because it's juicy and funny and we got to read it. Robinson didn't, blah, blah, blah. According to Louis Money, who worked in several of Greenborough's windowless 24-hour video porn stores, Robinson was a frequent customer in the 1990s and early 2000s. Money, 52, told the Assembly that Robinson came in as often as 5 nights a week to watch these videos in a private booth. 5 other men who said they were former employees or customers during this period also told the Assembly that Robinson visited 2 of these stores. In addition, Money said Robinson purchased hundreds of bootleg adult videos that Money sold on the side. He was good for at least 1 a week. But Money said Robinson didn't pay for the last one, which he described as a compilation of super hardcore films he acquired in New York City that were too risque to be sold in North Carolina. That story came out 2 months before the election. And it was, honestly, it's one of those things that's just so ridiculous. It's funny. Ridiculous because this guy loves to market himself as a good conservative Christian. He wrote in his memoir, he published a memoir. He wrote in his memoir that he found Jesus in 1989. And here he is, not that long ago, just spending all of his evenings at the adult store. And I want to be very, very clear here. I don't care about any of that. If he was just Mark, some random dude who works a 9 to 5, I don't care what this guy does. I don't care about his private life. I don't care what videos he watches. It sounds like he's a dude who enjoyed going to those places at night, and he was super friendly with everyone who worked there. Honestly, do not care. I don't judge. None of that matters. But he's a politician who was literally saying, you know what he said pornography was? He said it was teaching sex ed in public school. You couldn't do that because that's pornography. Well, guess what this guy does in his spare time? So it's the hypocrisy that was annoying. And the question was, okay, the story came out. It's a little sketchy, but like, it seems legit. Is it going to hurt his campaign? And Mark Robinson said, none of that's true. Yeah, it's just a hit piece on me. None of that stuff matters. Well, right after that, like 2 weeks after that article came out, CNN published a very different article about Mark Robinson. And I know you remember this one. Apparently, Mark Robinson loved to comment on adult websites, specifically one called Nude Africa, where he made a lot of disturbing comments. Do you remember this? It's so funny. He said things like, slavery is not bad. Some people need to be slaves. He said, I'm a black Nazi, with Nazi in all caps. He said Martin Luther King Jr. was worse than a maggot. He used a whole bunch of racial slurs. And he did this in the comment section of an adult website. You sometimes wonder who would leave a comment on a site like that. Mark Robinson is the guy leaving comments on a site like that. And CNN had enough evidence to back up all of this. They had the screenshots. They had the username. They did their homework. And what did Mark Robinson say about all this? He said, we are not getting out of this race. There are people who are counting on us to win this race. It's lies, fake news. None of it's true. And then what happened after all of that? The election happened. And how did it go? Let me show you. In that race that Donald Trump won that same night, Mark Robinson lost more by a bigger margin than any Republican had lost in North Carolina before, in like 40 years or something like that. So he lost by a lot. And that was supposed to be like a purple state. So that's a huge loss. So like those articles really did sink his campaign. And then, after all of this, Mark Robinson basically disappeared. I will be honest, I hadn't thought about the guy for years. It never even crossed my mind to ask, what is Mark Robinson up to now? Because there's so much other chaos happening, I stopped thinking about the guy. Well, funny thing about that, Mark Robinson this week reemerged. And the assembly is back on it. Robinson appeared on a podcast that is hosted by his former campaign manager, who's a sketchy guy in his own right, but whatever. And he basically admitted that some of those allegations against him were true. Like going to the adult store and spending 5 nights a week there and buying videos. Like, all right, some of that's legit. Here's what he said. I watched adult content and was involved with people that watched adult content, and that was absolutely true, he said on this podcast. I should point this out too. He did not directly address all the allegations raised in the CNN story. So, Mark Robinson is now admitting that, yeah, when I said all of these things are fake news and lies, turns out they really did nail everything I was doing. By the way, Mark Robinson sued CNN. You may remember this too. After their article came out about nude Africa, Mark Robinson sued them for defamation for $50 million. And then after he lost the election, he withdrew that lawsuit because he wasn't going to win. CNN had the receipts. Oh man. So at first glance, I just want to say none of this should be a big story because I don't care about this man's private life. I really don't. It should be nobody's business what he does in his spare time, especially if it's legal and consensual, which this was. But he's not a random dude. He built his entire political brand on promoting right-wing Christian extremism. You know, he said LGBTQ people were sexual deviants. He made religion the central part of his campaign, which is why he became lieutenant governor in the first place. By the way, he said he's very anti-abortion. Turns out he paid for an abortion as well after he found Jesus. So there's that. I don't know. And this is the other part of the podcast interview that was disturbing. Let me show you one more thing here. The interviewer asked him, why did you lie about all this? Asked why he lied during the campaign, Robinson said disputing the stories was necessary to help President Donald Trump carry North Carolina. Trump won the state while Robinson suffered the biggest gubernatorial defeat in the state since 1980. I won't say that I completely lied. Some of the things about the whole story, some of it, there's some truth to it. The most expedient thing to do for the people around me was to continue to fight. And if I had to ignore the truth at that moment for their expediency, I felt like it was the right thing to do. All of these people throw their values, their supposed values, under the bus the second it involves Donald Trump, the second it serves them a political purpose. And Mark Robinson is right here admitting all of it. He lied to protect Donald Trump. He lied because, well, he needs to win the election. Christianity is just a little facade he puts on. He doesn't give a shit about any of that. He'll lie freely if it's going to help him politically. So I ask you, what are his actual values here? Because it's not Christianity, because he's violating his supposed Christian values all the time. It's documented. He's lying about it when those things get exposed. So how much do any of these Christian politicians really care about their faith when it's politically convenient for them to lie about it? Right? He said his only regret from that time is not replacing his campaign team. So, tells you a lot about Christian politicians right there. And by the way, the Charlotte Observer noted that this must be a very recent epiphany because as recently as last year, Mark Robinson appeared on another podcast and still called the CNN report fake news. So, North Carolinians were right to reject Mark Robinson. It's why Republicans should have rejected Donald Trump, because none of these people have any actual core values or beliefs. They just know what to say to convince the most gullible, ignorant people in the country that they're all part of the same team, even though their actions always seem to contradict it. And the louder they brag about their Christian faith, the more shadiness that is probably lurking underneath. The irony in all of this, I think, is that Mark Robinson's life represents the sort of future that progressives are always fighting for, where reproductive freedom exists for everyone. You want to get an abortion? Go get an abortion if that's what's right for you. You want to watch adult content in, your personal life when it's not harming anybody and it's just you? Go do it. Who cares? That's the sexual revolution right there. It should be a private matter. That's what progressives want. But Mark Robinson climbed the right-wing political ladder largely because no one was paying attention to what he was doing in his spare time. And because, by the way, the abortion he paid for allowed him to pursue higher office in the first place. And the only way he knew he could become governor is by lying to Christians and telling them that his private life didn't matter because anyone bringing it up is making it up. I don't need a politician to be perfect, but Robinson is proof that for Republicans, the truth never matters. All you got to do is deny it every time, blame the other side, and they will forgive you because they don't have any core beliefs. It's infuriating. Okay, I will stop there. What questions do we have about Mark Robinson? Oh, thank you for that donation. Yes, I remember I'm sorry, it's not naked Africa, it's nude Africa. Get it right. Show them some respect. What else we got here? Why is this the controversy after everything I just said? Puritanical society. Again, the controversy is not any of the sex stuff or the fact that he visited a website. It's the comments are extreme, but it's the fact that he denied it and lied about it. And it's not until now, when it no longer matters, that he's coming clean with the fact that, of course, I lied about it. Of course, the reporters and the Democrats were right about me. Only now is he willing to say that because there are no consequences for it. Did he actually use his real name? No, he did not. He used a screen name, a pseudonym, but it was easy to trace back because he used the same screen name everywhere he went. So he hopes that being contrite will get him back into people's good graces. I don't actually know why he's doing this. I don't think it's because he's trying to get on people's good side. I don't think he's running for office in the future. I think it's because his former campaign manager just said, I'm doing a podcast now. Will you be my guest on it? And he felt obligated to say yes, which is fine. But I think that's the only reason he did it. I don't know why he's changing his tune on the denials now, though. So bearing false witness is okay if it helps your anti-Christ-like secular apathetic guy. Yeah, bearing false witness is only okay if you're a conservative Christian. Then you can break whatever commandments you want. Just ask Donald Trump and everyone who supports him still, somehow. Did he just say lying was the right thing to do? Yes. He said it was the right thing to do because it was for his daddy. It was for Trump. All right, I'm jumping to the next story here. All right. Let's talk about the Jehovah's Witnesses, because the leaders of that religious organization just made a big, I don't know where that's coming from. Let's take that away. There we go. We're going to talk about the Jehovah's Witnesses because they just made a big change in their religious rules, which I didn't know was a thing you could do, but apparently it very much is. The Jehovah's Witnesses, one of the many beliefs that they have, which is harmful, is they believe that you're not allowed to have blood transfusions. There is a ban on blood transfusions. And this has led to so many problems in the past. Like the ban on blood has led to countless deaths, often of children, because maybe you're a kid in surgery or there was a big accident and you need donated blood. But Jehovah's Witnesses believe you're not allowed to have blood in your body from someone else. And so they banned it. So people have died because they couldn't get blood transfusions. And sometimes we're talking about kids who don't know any better, who just had the misfortune of being born into a family where the parents were Jehovah's Witnesses, and those kids have no say in it. It is awful. Sometimes doctors have had to go to court to get a judge's order to save the life of a child because their parents would rather see them dead than violating their religious beliefs. It is such an awful, dumb belief. And so the reason they have this rule, it was introduced in 1945. And the reason they have this rule, here's how the Associated Press explained it. Jehovah's Witnesses' historic teachings on blood transfusions stem from biblical passages requiring believers to abstain from blood, which they interpret as applying not just to food, but to transfusions. While they teach that many detailed dietary laws in the Old Testament portion of the Bible no longer apply, they say this prohibition on partaking of blood is upheld as a universal principle for believers in other Bible passages. So the Bible says you can't take in blood. Like it's one thing if you personally decide you can't get a transfusion and then you're putting yourself in harm's way, whatever, that's on you. But when kids are dying because their parents won't let them be saved, we're talking about something truly pernicious. And the policy is so ingrained in Jehovah's Witness believers that there are like little cards they sometimes carried with them. This is an old one, but this is very real. This is the sort of card they would just carry around in their wallet that says, if I'm in an accident, no blood transfusions for me because Leviticus here says I can't have it. So think about that, emergency doctor operating on me right now. Like it's truly a disaster of a policy. And it's not, if you think that's old, let me show you something from the Jehovah's Witness magazine, The Watchtower, which is their official publication to tell believers what they believe. And they have a Q&A section. And there is a question right here. Let me go back up here. In light of Bible commands about the proper use of blood, how do Jehovah's Witnesses view medical procedures using one's own blood? And this is an interesting question, because what if you're in an accident and you need a donation of blood, but what if it's your own blood that has been stored in advance? Can you use that blood to go back into you, or is that ingesting blood, which you're not allowed to do? Which is it? How do you parse that? And for example, this isn't just in the case of an emergency. Sometimes if, I don't know if this is true, don't quote me on this. Sometimes if a woman is having a C-section when giving birth, it might be useful to store blood in advance in case the doctor needs it during the procedure. I think I've heard people reference that, but I don't know for sure. But in any case, there might be value to that. So are we allowed to do that? This question asks. What do the Jehovah's Witnesses say? If you scroll down here, occasionally, a doctor will urge a patient to deposit his own blood weeks before surgery so that if the need arises, he could transfuse the patient with his own stored blood. However, such collecting, storing, and transfusing of blood directly contradicts what is said in Leviticus and Deuteronomy. Blood is not to be stored. It is to be poured out, returned to God, as it were. Granted, the Mosaic law is not enforced now. Nevertheless, Jehovah's Witnesses respect the principles God included in it, and they are determined to abstain from blood. Hence, we do not donate blood, nor do we store for transfusion our blood that should be poured out. That practice conflicts with God's law. So you got that, everybody? It's super clear. This is in their official Watchtower publication from the year 2000, where they say you can't store your own blood. Don't try to bend the rules that way. You're not allowed to do that either. Okay, very clear on this. It's about as clear-cut a rule as you will ever find in a religion. So naturally, Jehovah's Witness leaders have decided, why don't we change the rule? Why don't we just pretend that God spoke to us and say the rule has changed? Here's what happened. Last week, one of the leaders of the Jehovah's Witnesses, one of the men who functions on their governing body, he announced that it's now fine to store your own blood in advance if you need it in the future. Mind you, blood can only be stored for weeks at a time, but if you need it for a surgery you're planning in the future, it's okay. Now, would you call that a rule change? No, they want you to know they're not changing anything. They're just clarifying what everyone has always known. Everyone knew this, but I guess there's some confusion, so we need to clear up the matter. So we're just letting you know you can store your own blood. He says a Christian must decide for himself how his own blood will be handled in the case of a surgical procedure, etc. Let me show you the video they actually released saying all this, because it's ridiculous.
The Bible does not comment on the use of a person's own blood in medical and surgical care. Regarding the use of one's own blood, our position has been, as is stated in the October 15, 2000 issue of the Watchtower. There it says, a Christian must decide for himself how his own blood will be handled in the course of a surgical procedure, medical test, or current therapy. For that reason, many Christians accept simple procedures such as blood tests, as well as more complicated procedures involving their own blood, such as the use of heart-lung machines, cell salvage devices, and kidney dialysis treatments. However, the list of treatment options continues to grow. Therefore, after much prayer and consideration of the Scriptures, the governing body has decided to clarify our position on the use of a patient's own blood in medical and surgical care. The clarification is this: each Christian must decide for himself how his own blood will be used in all medical and surgical care. This includes whether to allow his own blood to be removed, stored, and then given back to him.
Yeah. So you see, everybody, he says it's just a clarification on something the religion has always believed, but no, it's not. It's very much a reversal of what they have said in the past and what everybody in the witnesses believed to be the case. And it doesn't go far enough, because a lot of critics are saying the Bible doesn't comment on blood transfusions at all, so why are you parsing a thing that didn't even exist back in the day? Also, who benefits from this? Even if this is a welcome change, because at least they have some options, for medical emergencies involving blood loss, you won't have your own blood sitting on a shelf somewhere waiting to be given back to you. And for patients who need actual blood transfusions, like from donated blood, this will not help them at all. So this clarification helps just the fewest number of people ever. The sort of people who know they might need their own blood in the future and have the ability to donate it and store it, which many countries and many parts of America don't have those kinds of facilities at all. So this is a rule change that helps 4 people maybe. And why are they making this change now? What prompted this change? No one knows. It just seems to have come out of nowhere. The ex-Jehovah's Witness subreddit was just going to town on this one because they were infuriated. So many of these people know people who have been harmed by this belief. And to have the Jehovah's Witness leader say now, yeah, we never meant that. You could have stored your own blood. Like, nope, that's not what you said earlier. Some of them are also playing little games with any family members who are still Jehovah's Witnesses, where they're like, hey, what did you think about this rule change? Because that's not allowed, is it? And they were tipped off that this change might be coming. So they said, hey, what's the rule on the blood ban? And the believer would say, well, there's no transfusion of blood. And then the next day they're like, so then what do you make of this? Just to catch them, to see if they will notice the hypocrisy or the contradiction. And of course, the believers are just rationalizing it using that dude's language. It's just a clarification. We always knew we could store our own blood. No, you didn't. All we've learned from all of this is that religious leaders can always rewrite their own rules when it's convenient. That's all we've learned from all this. There is no such thing as a timeless biblical truth. And this change comes only after so many Jehovah's Witnesses have died, because the religion made it clear there's no moral ambiguity on this issue. It's black and white, no blood transfusions whatsoever. And now they're like, oh no, there's gray areas in here. Like, if you can soften a moral commandment overnight like this, it means the original rule was never that absolute to begin with, and any rule can change on a whim. What are they going to say next year? It's cool to celebrate like birthdays that end in like every 10 years. Are they going to make that change soon? I also find it infuriating that these same leaders refuse to acknowledge how their interpretation of the rules led to suffering in the past. If you're going to say, we want to clarify this because you know what? We didn't clarify before and a lot of people got hurt. We don't want that to happen. They didn't say anything like that. They're not even acknowledging their culpability in all of this in the past. And if God's will can only be clarified after decades of preventable suffering, then the problem is not the religious believer's misunderstanding of the scripture. It's that the system was designed to make sure that suffering happens in the first place. This is why you never obey first and question later. Do it the other way around. Don't obey. Obeying is wrong. Okay, I will stop there with this story. What questions we got here? In other news, top JW leader announces major surgery planned. Film at 11. Yeah, I'm sure someone needs surgery and needs to get their blood stored, or maybe a family member who's close to them, and they're like, oh, we need to fix this now. I'm going to schedule the surgery for like 2 days after that video goes out. I mean, I haven't seen proof of that, but I wouldn't be surprised if that were true. Wait, what are blood substitutes? I don't even know where that question is coming from. I will say, if you look into how doctors have tried to deal with the blood ban in the past, they have tried to figure out workarounds so that they can help out their Jehovah's Witness patients. And there have been some clever scientific breakthroughs that have happened in some cases because of that. But honestly, it shouldn't require some sort of workaround when the solution is sitting right there in front of you. So I don't know what you're asking about, but I will. So I'll skip that question. Now I think about it. What do Jehovah's Witnesses say about plasma and ringers? I don't know what they say about those things. That is a question for the subreddit, because I don't know what they make of these other scientific breakthroughs that involve blood, but not really. I don't know. Here's an opportunity to create JW blood storage services. Seriously, business opportunity for anyone who wants to take it. It's a great idea. There's an acquaintance of mine who set up a business years ago where he promised to take care of your pets after the rapture. And you could pay for that service. And he didn't have to do anything because the rapture was never going to happen. turned out to be a hoax. Like, he was never actually setting up a business, but a lot of media outlets fell for it. Okay, let's get to this next one. If I can get this to move, give me 1 second here. There we go. Okay. Some of you were asking about this story, and we're definitely going to talk about it. So James Tallarico, he is the Senate candidate, the Democratic Senate candidate in Texas. He is a hardcore Christian, but he's a progressive Christian in a sense. I don't know how progressive he is, but he's progressive enough, and that adds a wrinkle to the Senate race in Texas, because you're going to have a MAGA / corrupt Republican who loves to talk about Jesus on the campaign trail versus a Democrat who actually lives it on the campaign trail. We don't know what's going to happen. We will see. But Republicans, as I've said for weeks now, they don't know how to deal with someone like Tallarico. You can't accuse him of not being a Christian. All you could say is he's doing it the wrong way, which is a ridiculous thing to say, as if there was only one right way to be a Christian. So one of the interesting things is we're going to start to see a lot of Christians, conservative Christians, try to knock down James Tallarico, but they're going to flail as they do it. And one example of this happened very recently because two Christian nationalists were speaking to each other on a podcast, and they both happen to be tied to Pete Hegseth. I'm not blaming Pete Hegseth for this story, but also I'm not blaming Hegseth. Brooks Pottinger is the pastor who runs the church that Hegseth attended in Tennessee. Brooks Pottinger is also a pastor who's going to take over a Washington, D.C. church founded by Christian nationalist Doug Wilson. And so this guy is in the thick of it, and he has close ties to Hegseth. And by the way, if you think it's unfair that I'm pulling Hegseth into this, I just want you to remember that in 2008, when Barack Obama was running for president, they found sermons his old pastor said from years prior that Obama had nothing to do with, and they tried to use it against Obama. So if Republicans were willing to do that back then, I don't think it's weird to say Hegseth still attends the type of church that Brooks Pottinger is running now. So it's even closer of a tie. So that's Brooks Pottinger. He's one of the dudes involved in this. The other guy is Joshua Hames, and Hames is also mixed in with this. I think he used to be like an intern at one of Pottinger's churches, but basically these dudes just run their podcast now. That's what they do. And I want to show you a clip of what they said this week because it's truly, truly disturbing. And when you hear the clip, I want you to just imagine for a second, they're not talking about religion. They're just using the language that they're using, because these two dudes are talking about how great it would be if God just took care of James Tallarico. Let me play you the clip and then we will talk about it.
Public enemies, these are the orcs at the gate. You are not called to love the barbarian horde that is planning to break into your city and, pillage, plunder, rape, and mutilate you and your people. Right. You don't love that horde. That is your enemy, and you pray. This is where you have imprecatory psalms. This is where you pray strongly. The psalmist is not shy. God, destroy them. Make them as dung on the ground, right? So, but Madison and I were talking about that, and so I say, even in the debate, I think you might have seen it, but that I had on campus the other day, I pray that God kills him. Ultimately, that means killing his heart and raising him up to new life in Christ. That's the first thing.
We want him crucified. with Christ.
That's exactly
I want
right.
him to be, I think, Saul of Tarsus, Talarico of Tarsus.
Yes,
That's
yeah.
what I want. Who would say, I was holding the garments while they stoned Stephen, and now I'm that's what we want.
Yes, we want death and new life,
Yeah.
right? And if it would not be within God's will to do so, stop him by any means necessary, O God.
So, do you think that's a threat or not? Again, the first guy, the guy who spoke most there was Joshua Hames, and he is the one who said, I pray that God kills him. Before adding, like, that means his heart. I hope God kills his heart because James Talarico needs Jesus in his life. He needs to find Christ. He needs new life in Christ. James Talarico, the seminarian who is already a Christian, isn't really Christian in these guys' minds. But look at the language. I pray that God kills him, to which Pottinger responds, yeah, right. We want him crucified with Christ. And you notice they have the plausible deniability there. They're not saying they want him to die. They're saying, we just want God to basically, destroy him, but then lift him up again as a good conservative Christian. But it's very much a wink, wink, nudge, nudge sort of thing. They even said the phrase imprecatory prayers, which is praying for the death of someone else. Like, you can pretend all you want. They're not saying they want him to die, but also they're not saying that. And what did they say at the very end of that? Like, God, stop him by any means necessary. So, those are awful, awful words coming from Pete Hegseth's pastor, a guy who's about to run a church in Washington, D.C., about an actual candidate running for office. And I just want you to think for just a second. Imagine if a black pastor said anything like that about Donald Trump or about any sitting Republican. What do you think the response would be? Do you think the Fox News, Newsmax crowd would say, well, it's not a big deal. He's not talking about actual death. He's talking about spiritual death. Do you think that's what their reaction would be? Of course not. It would be all they talk about for the next several weeks, and then they would go on to tie every single Democrat to that pastor. That's how it would work if this happened the other way around. But these guys do it, and you're barely going to hear a thing about it because this is just the way conservative Christians talk now. They know they can get away with it. They know white evangelicals aren't going to do a thing to stop them or call them out on it. They're going to pretend these guys never said it at all. So they know they can get away with this, which also sends a clear wink, wink message to people who care nothing about spiritual death, but who very much are armed with weapons. Because that's the sort of people who listen to this shit. So it's a dangerous thing these pastors are doing. They're going to laugh it off and say, that's not what we meant. How dare you say that's what we meant? In fact, after an article was posted about how Pete Hegseth's pastor is calling for the death of Talarico, guess what Brooks Pottinger said in response to that? Oh, this headline is excellent clickbait, yet it suffers from the fact that it's false. I should know, as I happen to be pretty close to that fella you slandered. And strange, you used a picture of someone, Pete Hegseth, who has literally nothing to do with the conversation at hand. My dude, he goes to your church. He has something very much to do with the sort of stuff you say. What else does he say? Let me break it down. Then he talks about abortion. Talarico is pro-choice, as if that makes up for him saying, I want the death of Talarico. What does he actually say? By the way, this is way too long for a tweet. They need limits on Twitter. So, as a Christian, when I pray imprecatory psalms about those who celebrate baby murder, which is not a thing anyone's doing, because babies are like born and crying, and we do not want to see them murdered. I am not from my heart praying for their death. I'm praying for their conversion. My dude, then use the word conversion. I pray for the conversion of James Tallarico. That would also be a very stupid thing to say, but notice he didn't say that word. He said death. He said imprecatory. He said by any means necessary, because they know what they're doing when they say that sort of language. They know they are using their dumbest, most violent supporters. They know they're saying the buzzwords that will click to those people. Interesting, you neglected to quote where I said my desire is for him to become Tallarico of Tarsus. Right, a guy who was changed by Christ and became a force for the gospel. You are free to disagree, but does not journalistic integrity require you to present my view honestly? And then the way he's talking there, you have to imagine he like took off a glove and challenged the reporter to a duel. They did report it honestly because they quoted what you guys said. I wish for the death of Tallarico. I pray that God kills him. Unquote. I pray that God would stop them by any means necessary. That's what you said. It's absolutely fair to quote that in the headline. It's not out of context. By the way, James Tallarico also responded to the article about all this, but look at the way he responds, because again, fundamentally, he's just a good guy, it seems. Jesus loves. Christian nationalism kills. You may pray for my death, Pastor, but I still love you. I love you more than you could ever hate me. And I love that response because I imagine Pottinger and Hames reading it and getting increasingly frustrated because they thought this would tick him off. And he's coming back and he's like, give me a hug. And you know, they can't handle a Christian who talks that way. They can't handle Democrats who don't match their rhetoric at the bottom of the barrel. They can't handle someone who's uplifting others because the only thing conservative Christians know how to do is drag everyone down with them. So kudos to Tallarico for handling this well. And by the way, I see no reason to distance Hegseth from what these pastors are saying because he's very much tied to them. But at the very least, I think people need to talk about the violence coming from the conservative Christian right and the Republicans who vote for them and support them and vice versa, because these people are all fine with this kind of rhetoric. Trump has normalized it. All of these Christians, conservative Christians, talk the same way. And they act like it's no big deal when they're called out on it. But you know this is how they talk about these other people behind closed doors and sometimes in front of their microphones to their fans. All right, I will stop there. What questions we got here? I got one more story for you after this. I actually like this comment right here. We'll go back to the other one in a second. They go low, Tallarico goes high. Got to respect that. This is one instance where when they go low, we go high. This actually works. Not in the Michelle Obama, let's always take the high ground approach. No. But in this case, I think Tallarico handled it perfectly. There is a song, and they will know we are Christians by our love. Wanting someone to die shows what their idea of love is. Yeah, it very much does. When you hear the way conservative Christians talk in the political realm, it shows you what their values are, and it shows you they don't have any. Any means necessary? God has justified a lot of means. That's right. That's why that sort of rhetoric is dangerous too, because plenty of people will cause violence and say they were just acting on God's behalf. They're delusional enough to talk like that, so it's not out of the question. That's why you don't talk like that. Sounds a lot like endorsing political violence to me. That's right. I agree. It is dangerous rhetoric. These guys know exactly what they're doing, but they're all in these circles where they all talk the same way. Can we point to this when they say that the left are the ones escalating violence? Absolutely, and you don't even need to stop there. There are plenty of examples of it, not just from random pastor podcasters, but from people in office right now. I mean, was it just last week or 2 weeks ago where you had like 2 or 3 different members of Congress, Republicans, basically saying all Muslims were evil and needed to be deported. Not extremists. Nope, just Muslims in general. Like, they all use violent rhetoric. They all dismiss everybody of who's brown, who's of a religion they don't like. They all talk this way. And Republicans do not have the wherewithal or the guts or the conscience to call any of it out. They're either way too scared or they agree. And people still vote for these guys. They are no longer tweets. They are full-length early morning bird songs. Well played. This is what happens when you buy a Twitter subscription and you can write as long as you want, which also explains Donald Trump's giant blocks of texts on Truth Social. Almost 2 years. Let's go. Thank you for being a member for 20 months. I appreciate it. And thank you for gifting all those memberships, Lauren. I appreciate that. All right, I got one more story for you. Give me 1 second here. All right. I got to tell you a story about two particular Catholic priests in Minnesota, in St. Cloud, Minnesota. And these are disturbing stories about these two priests, but that's actually not the story I want to tell you. The story involves the legal battle they are currently waging. But let me start by telling you who these two guys are. The first dude I will show you is a guy named Joseph Herzing. And this is him right over here. And the story about Joseph Herzing is that last year, this guy was charged with some very heinous crimes. Take a look at this. This is from December of 2025. A Catholic priest in central Minnesota is charged with sexually abusing, physically assaulting, and threatening a woman to whom he had given spiritual guidance. Joseph Herzing, 61, has served as a priest in several central Minnesota communities, including St. Cloud and Little Falls. He was charged last week, with third-degree criminal sexual conduct, stalking, and 3 counts of threatening violence. The complaint alleges that in February of 2022, this guy physically assaulted the woman, choking her, threatening to kill her. A few months later, the woman was upset, expressed awful thoughts, and walked to a nearby river. Herzing convinced her to return home and said he should just let her unalive herself. I don't know what to say there. Horrible, horrible stuff. Coming from a priest. I mean, coming from anyone, but coming from a priest. But this guy was charged with all those crimes back in December. So, okay, disturbing stuff. I mean, setting aside the horrific details I just shared with you, this guy was a priest. He's supposed to be celibate, isn't he? That's disturbing. But also, he's in a position of power over this woman if he was giving her guidance, spiritual guidance. So even if everything had been consensual, and the charges make clear that it was not, even if it was, it would have been unethical and potentially criminal because he had power over her. So that's a disturbing story. Now, let me tell you a different story involving this guy. This guy is Father Aaron Kuhn, Kuhn. And last year, this guy from the exact same diocese in St. Cloud, Minnesota, was also charged with sexually abusing someone. And here's the story about him. The criminal complaint alleges that Kuhn sexually abused the woman multiple times while he was providing her with spiritual advice over nearly 3 years from 2019 to 2022. According to the complaint, the victim told police that Kuhn used his role as a spiritual advisor to manipulate her and pressure her into sex. The complaint says the victim reported that the abuse escalated over time, although she repeatedly asked Kuhn to stop. So, very damning allegations again. And again, if those allegations are true, what that guy did was also unethical and potentially criminal, even if everything was consensual, which it allegedly was not. So, why is all this potentially criminal, even if it was consensual? The reason is because many states have laws that forbid improper sexual contact by someone in a position of power over someone else, even if they are of legal age, even if they say it's consensual. Basically, the law says you can't really give consent in those circumstances because of the power imbalance. So if you're a college professor and there's an adult student in your class, that could break the law if anything happens. What if you're a boss and an employee? You're both adults, but you can't really give consent in that situation. Or a therapist and a client, something like that. Now, as I mentioned in a separate story a couple of weeks ago, only 14 states, plus Washington, D.C., have laws on the books that say a priest and a parishioner are also on that list. Only 14 states have that rule. But Minnesota is one of those states. If you're a priest, even not in the Catholic Church, if you're a pastor who's allowed to get married and you're allowed to have sex, you're not allowed to do it with someone in your congregation, even if they are an adult, because of that power dynamic. So I told you the story here is not about those two priests getting charged with these crimes. The story is about the lawsuit that is coming afterwards, because it turns out both of these men have the exact same lawyer, the same defense lawyer, and I need to tell you what this lawyer is saying in court to defend his clients. Because what that lawyer has said is that these charges, the charges that they violated their position by taking advantage of someone under their spiritual guidance, that charge, at the very least, needs to be dismissed, their lawyer says. Why? On the grounds that if you punish these men, it is violating their religious freedom. I shit you not, that is the argument. Here is what it says in the lawsuit. And let me show you what this says. Here is one part right here. First, this is saying the charges. You can't charge him because of this. First, it expressly makes Father Herzing guilty of crime because of his status as a priest. This is a flagrant breach of the required high wall. And just to contextualize that a little bit, they're saying if you punish this guy for abusing his authority over this victim, you're basically punishing him because he's a priest. If he was just a random dude named Joe and he did the same thing, you would not be punishing him. You're only going after him because of his status in the Catholic Church. How dare you, judge? So he says that charge should be dropped because it's violating his religious freedom. Of course, the obvious response to all this is, no, they're not. They're not going after this guy because he's a Catholic priest. They're going after him because that's how power dynamics work. The state's not going after him because he's religious. They're going after him because his job gives him authority over other people. And just because that happens to be in the realm of religion doesn't matter. But that's not all this judge is saying. He also that's not all the lawyer is saying. This lawyer also says it's unfair to target these guys because it's wrong to assume that they are always priests even when they're off the clock. And all the stuff that happened between them was not like in the middle of a service. It was like at night. And as we all know, you're only a priest from like 9 to 5. Once the whistle blows, you go back home and you can do whatever you want. Go with Mark Robinson to a strip club if you want. It doesn't matter. You're not a priest all the time. That's another argument this lawyer actually made. And then, because this lawyer is desperate, he also went after the victim herself. It's quite literally victim blaming. Let me show you what this defense lawyer said here. The complaint notes that Father Herzing, by the way, I'm only showing you Father Herzing's complaint, but the same stuff is written in the other guy's complaint. The complaint notes that Father Herzing admitted to kissing adult A on 2 occasions, but denied having a spiritual guidance relationship with her. The complainant has been a predator of the sexually unavailable. She has a history of intimacy with at least 4 priests, if not more. Here, she pursued a sexual relationship disconnected from any spiritual advice. Because she knew that by status and religious doctrine, a priest cannot give advice, aid, and comfort and still had sex with her, she did it on purpose. Once her previous pre-sexual relationships had concluded, she announced to church officials that she has been victimized, when what really happened is that she succeeded at her multiple seductions, all of them distinct from the priest-penitent relationship. Oh my God, the argument they are making to the judge is that she took advantage of my client, the priest. It's quite literally slut-shaming. Leave it to a lawyer for a Catholic priest to go all in on victim blaming as a strategy. To be clear, he is being prosecuted for practicing. I want to quote something Skeptically Dan wrote in an article about this. He said, perhaps one of these priests' religious liberty defense would garner more sympathy if he were being prosecuted by the state for practicing his religion, not for violating it. Because that's what he did. He violated his religious beliefs and now he's being targeted for it. But also, let's say you go along with the victim blaming argument, which is bad to begin with, but let's say you believe in that. The fact that this woman revealed that she wanted to go after priests, that should make the priest more culpable for his actions, not less. Because that should give a priest an even bigger barrier to put between them. If one of your parishioners comes up to you and says, I have a thing for priests, you should be like, well, I should stay the hell away from you then. Not, oh, let me take down the barrier. Let's see where this goes. And I happen to agree with that logic there. Like someone in a position of power has the responsibility to avoid being in these situations. Because even if you remove the physical assault accusations and the threats from the mix, even if you set aside the Catholic Church's really dumb rule that priests are not allowed to have sex, a priest, even consensually, sleeping with a parishioner is so wildly inappropriate that it totally makes sense for the law to punish it. But that's what the defense lawyer is arguing for these 2 men. Now, for what it's worth, the Diocese of St. Cloud says, as soon as we heard about these allegations, we suspended both of these priests, but neither statement acknowledged the power dynamic concerns. Only like, hey, can you pray that our priests get better? That's all their thing said. But it says a lot, all of this says a lot about how the Catholic Church views accountability. Because, to be clear, the state is not targeting their religion. The state is not policing their sermons. They are enforcing the same basic principle that exists in any profession that is built on trust and vulnerability. They're treating the priest the same way they would treat a doctor, a therapist, a college professor, what have you. Religion shouldn't grant you immunity from the kinds of crimes that would punish other people with the same kind of power. I feel like that should be obvious here. Priests are not just adults who can do whatever they please. There is a code of conduct that needs to be obeyed. even if it's not spelled out for you, because of the asymmetry of those relationships. You can't switch it off when the workday ends. You are still a priest when you go home, just like you are a teacher during summer vacation. To believe otherwise is to fundamentally ignore how coercion works. But thank goodness that the secular law cares more about these victims than the priests and their institutions and their lawyer. There is no reason clergy members should be the one profession given the privilege to pretend that their authority has no consequences. So just a ridiculous lawsuit. We will see how it plays out, but wanted to bring that to your attention because I could not believe their lawyer was actually running with that argument. All right, that's it. What questions do we have here? More states need these laws. It should be a given, honestly. Yes, they should. And I think in Georgia, as we speak, Georgia is on the verge of becoming the 15th state to add clergy members to the list of professions that would have this sort of power dynamic where you could be criminalized for consensual sex with a parishioner or someone under your purview. Religious freedom to grape? Yeah, I mean that's kind of what they're arguing. They're even saying it's consensual. They're kind of denying. They're ignoring the other charges, which are very serious, and they're just saying, just on this charge, the charge involving the power dynamic, and nothing else, you can't go after us for that. If you want to go after us for the other stuff, different issue. But let's remove one of these charges because, at the very least, let's try to get some of this off the plate. Has the Catholic Church separated themselves from these priests, or are they still priests? My understanding is both of these men have been suspended from their duties. They are currently in priest rehab somewhere because, you can be accused of a crime, but until a verdict is reached, until a judge says you are guilty, there's no reason to separate from them just yet. So I think the Catholic Church, as they have every right to do, is saying they're no longer on duty. They are at rehab, but we're not cutting ties with them until a ruling comes down. Until they are actually guilty of a crime, they're not parting ways. All right, that is it. Thanks for being here. If you were watching this all the way through, we had a little bit of a lag today because of some tech issues. We'll see if we could work those out later. I will be back next Thursday night as usual. And you know the drill. Go like and subscribe and all those things. Go subscribe to the newsletter if you can. I appreciate that. And you can always support the channel at patreon.com/Hemant. All right, I will see you next week. Have a good one.